'Is he at home?' 'Why?' rejoined Dick. 'Because if he is, I have a letter for him.' 'From whom?' said Dick. 'From Mr Garland.' 'Oh!' said Dick, with extreme politeness. 'Then you may hand it over, sir. And if you're to wait for an answer, sir, you may wait in the passage, sir, which is an airy and well ventilated apartment, sir.' 'Thank you,' returned Kit. 'But I am to give it to himself, if you please.' The excessive audacity of this retort so overpowered Mr Chuckster, and so moved his tender regard for his friend's honour, that he declared, if he were not restrained by official considerations, he must certainly have annihilated Kit upon the spot. A resentment of the affront, which he did consider, under the extraordinary circumstances of aggravation attending it, could but have met with proper sanction and approval of a jury of Englishmen, who, he had no doubt, would have returned a verdict of justifiable homicide, coupled with a high testimony to the morals and character of the avenger. Mr Swiveller, without being quite so hot upon the matter, was rather shamed by his friend's excitement, and not a little puzzled how to act, Kit being quite cool and good humoured, when the single gentleman was heard to call violently down the stairs. 'Didn't I see somebody for me come in?' cried the lodger.
'Yes, sir,' replied Dick. 'Certainly, sir.'
'Then where is he?' roared the single gentleman.
'He's here, sir,' rejoined Mr Swiveller. 'Now, young man, don't you hear you're to go upstairs? Are you deaf?'
Kit did not appear to think it worth his while to enter into any altercation, but hurried off and left the glorious Apollos gazing at each other in silence.
'Didn't I tell you so?' said Mr Chuckster. 'What do you think of that?'
Mr Swiveller, being in the main a good-natured fellow, and not perceiving in the conduct of Kit any villainy of enormous magnitude, scarcely knew what answer to return. He was relieved from his perplexity, however, by the entrance of Mr Sampson and his sister, Sally, at sight of whom Mr Chuckster precipitately retired. Mr Brass and his lovely companion appeared to have been holding a consultation over their temperate breakfast, upon some matter of great interest and importance. On the occasion of such conferences, they generally appeared in the office some half an hour after their usual time, in a very smiling state, as though their late plots and designs had tranquillized their minds and shed a light upon their toilsome way. In the present instance they seemed particularly gay, Miss Sally's aspect being of a most oily kind, and Mr Brass rubbing his hands in an exceedingly jocose and light-hearted manner.
'Well, Mr Richard,' said Brass, 'how are we this morning? Are we pretty fresh and cheerful, sir? Eh, Mr Richard?'
'Pretty well, sir,' replied Dick.
'That's well,' said Brass. 'Ha ha ha! We should be as gay as larks, Mr Richard. Why not? It's a pleasant world we live in, sir, a very pleasant world. There are bad people in it, Mr Richard, but if there were no bad people, there would be no good lawyers. Ha ha ha! Any letters by the post this morning, Mr Richard?'
Mr Swiveller answered in the negative.
'Ha!' said Brass. 'No matter. If there's little business to-day, there'll be more to-morrow. A contented spirit, Mr Richard, is the sweetness of existence. Anybody been here, sir?'
'Only my friend,' replied Dick. 'May we ne'er want a—'
'Friend!' Brass chimed in quickly. 'Or a bottle to give him. Ha 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 ha! That's the way the song runs, isn't it? Very good song, Mr Richard, very good. I like the sentiment of it. Ha 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 ha! Your friend's the young man from Witherden's office, I think. Yes? May we ne'er want a... Nobody else at all been, Mr Richard?'
'Only somebody to the lodger,'
replied Mr Swiveller.
'Oh, indeed!' cried Brass. 'Somebody to the lodger, eh? Ha ha ha! Ah, may we ne'er want a friend, or a... somebody to the lodger, eh, Mr Richard?'
'Yes,' said Dick, a little disconcerted by the excessive buoyancy of spirits which his employer displayed. 'With him now.
With him now!' cried Brass. 'Ha ha ha! Ah, there! Let 'em be merry and free, toorl-rool. Hey, Mr Richard! Ha ha ha!'
'Oh, certainly,' replied Dick.
'And who,' said Brass, shuffling among his papers, 'who is the lodger's visitor? Not a lady visitor, I hope, eh, Mr Richard? The morals of the marks, you know, sir, when lovely woman stoops to folly, and all that, eh, Mr Richard?'
'Another young man who belongs to Witherden's too, or half belongs there,' returned Richard. 'Kit they call him.'
'Kit, eh?' said Brass. 'Strange name. Name of a dancing master's fiddle, eh, Mr Richard? Ha ha ha! Ah, Kit's there, is he? Oh!
Dick looked at Miss Sally, wondering that she didn't check this uncommon exuberance on the part of Mr Sampson. But as she made no attempt to do so, and rather appeared to exhibit a tacit acquiescence in it, he concluded they had just been cheating somebody and receiving the bill.
'Will you have the goodness, Mr Richard,' said Brass, taking a letter from his desk, 'just to step over to Peckham Rye with that? There's no answer, but it's rather particular, and should go by hand. Charge the office with your coach hire back, you know. Don't spare the office. Get as much out of it as you can. Clerk's motto, eh, Mr Richard? Ha ha ha!'
Mr Swiveller solemnly doffed the aquatic jacket, put on his coat, took down his hat from its peg, pocketed the letter, and departed. As soon as he was gone, up rose Miss Sally Brass, and smiling sweetly at her brother, who nodded and smote his nose in return, withdrew also. Sampson Brass was no sooner left alone than he set the office door wide open, and establishing himself at his desk directly opposite, so that he could not fail to see anybody who came downstairs and passed out at the street door, began to write with extreme cheerfulness and assiduity, humming as he did so, in a voice that was anything but musical, certain vocal snatches which appeared to have reference to the union between church and state, inasmuch as they were compounded of the evening hymn and God Save the King. Thus the attorney of Bevis Marks sat, and wrote, and hummed, for a long time, except when he stopped to listen with a very cunning face, and hearing nothing, went on humming louder and writing slower than ever. At length, in one of these pauses, he heard his lodger's door opened and shut, and footsteps coming down the stairs. Then Mr Brass left off writing entirely, and, with his pen in his hand, hummed his very loudest, shaking his head meanwhile from side to side, like a man whose whole soul was in the music, and smiling in a manner quite seraphic. It was towards this moving spectacle that the staircase and the sweet sounds guided Kit, on whose arrival before his door, Mr Brass stopped his singing, but not his smiling, and nodded affably, at the same time beckoning to him with his pen.
'Kit,' said Mr Brass, in the pleasantest way imaginable, 'how do you do?'
Kit, being rather shy of his friend, made a suitable reply, and had his hand upon the lock of the street door when Mr Brass called him softly back.
'You are not to go, if you please, Kit,' said the attorney in a mysterious and yet businesslike way. 'You are to step in here, if you please. Dear me, dear me, when I look at you,' said the lawyer, quitting his stool and standing before the fire with his back towards it, 'I am reminded of the sweetest little face that ever my eyes beheld. I remember your coming there, twice or thrice, when we were in possession. Ah, Kit, my dear fellow, gentlemen in my profession have such painful duties to perform sometimes, that you needn't envy us. You needn't indeed.'
'I don't, sir,' said Kit, 'though it isn't for the like of me to judge.'
'Our only consolation, Kit,' pursued the lawyer, looking at him in a sort of pensive abstraction, 'is that although we cannot turn away the wind, we can soften it, we can temper it, if I may say so, to the shorn lambs.'
'Shorn indeed,' thought Kit. 'Pretty close. But he didn't say so.
'On that occasion, Kit,'
said Mr Brass. 'On